bem-vindos ao Cultura Documentários. Nosso filme de hoje é KARSH, Fotografia e História, dirigido em 2009 por YOUSUF. Eis um curioso retrato de um grande retratista, armênio de origem, canadense de formação. Pense em uma figura icônica do século XX. E YOUSUF KARSH certamente a clicou. Hemingway e Picasso, Kennedy e Fidel, Einstein e Disney, Churchill e Mandela, Sophia Loren e a Rainha Elizabeth. Foram mais de 15 mil retratos em 60 anos de carreira. KARSH é história. Bom programa.
The nature of photography's relationship to time, and thus our own relationship to time, is a very complicated one. The photograph captures a moment in the past that one experiences in the present, and therefore every photograph is ultimately about the passing of time, and therefore is also about our own imminent passing. Roland Barthes called photography an anthropological revolution in human history. And I think what he's trying to suggest is that the photograph produced a different relationship to time and space for human beings than any media before it.
His quest takes him far beyond an exploration of the technical limits of camera and film, and into a study of the complexities and nuances of the human spirit. This is the challenge that has absorbed today's guest. Throughout the world, the record of his search appears in photographs which are as famous as his name, YOUSUF KARSH.
He really came out of the old school of portraiture. He was really continuing a grand tradition. This is history, Karsh's history. He's left this for us to go back and see who is important in our lives. You know, Karsh did everybody. I mean, he photographed the Pope. I've never photographed the Pope. Many, many, many folks. Not too many women in here.
Il est l'historien photographique de toute une époque. Je crois qu'il n'en a pas loupé un de ses héros.
YOUSUF KARSH was interested in the monumental. The celebrity was a figure who stood above us, so to speak, was a form of sculpture in a certain way. His style was involved with volumes, contours, solidity, strength, permanence, all those features and aspects that are generally not present in street portraiture at all.
One has to recognize that KARSH is a very popular photographer. Partly that is, of course, because he photographed popular celebrities, political icons, and so on. But partly it's because he's a powerful photographer in that he reflects back to us what we want to see. We want to see a genius in Einstein. We want to see a great humanitarian in Schweitzer. We want to see all of the promise of John F. Kennedy, and we see that in those portraits.
We can never underestimate the power that memory has as a motive for portrait photography. Sometimes it's possible to imaginatively leap back in time to that moment when the picture was taken, the brightness of youth, the occasion of a marriage, a graduation, even a passport photograph can have this poignance for us, it seems to me.
I showed you my wedding picture, said that way. Every time I look at that picture, there's something that reminds me of something else in it, nice, good. And that to me is why a print is still something that I can look at it and look at it and look at it. YOUSUF took my wedding pictures. It was at the Windsor Hotel. I didn't see it as a famous person. It was my cousin.
Vous êtes arménien d'origine.
Oui.
Vous êtes arrivé au Canada à l'âge de 16 ans. Vous étiez très jeune.
Monsieur.
Est-ce que vous vous souvenez de votre enfance en Arménie?
Ah, c'était toute tristesse, n'est-ce pas? Je le désire mieux de l'oublier. Mais c'est facile de l'oublier en entrant au Canada. Ici, on trouve la réception.
I mean, you know about the Turkish genocide. That when he first came over from, I say Armenia, from the old country, my father met him in Halifax and brought him over to Sherbrooke, Quebec.
And KARSH never talked about his youth and his being Armenian. It's almost like he was not. He was an artist and a photographer. And he just happened to be Armenian.
The family said, look, we want to send one of our sons to Canada. And my father was established here, so established. He had a profession. He was a photographer. He taught YOUSUF quite a bit, but my father always also knew that there was another photographer in Boston who was going to be able to give YOUSUF more instructions, and that's when they sent YOUSUF to John Garrow in Boston.
In my apprenticeship days in Boston with John Garrow, he had a most unusual life indeed. He only worked by available light, daylight. And so 4 o'clock to 6, there was no adequate light, at least he thought so, to do any work. So I was trained as the formal bartender to go and get some alcohol, which was dreadful alcohol during Prohibition. As I was the happy recipient of all this conversation, it was always with the accomplished men, the accomplished women. And when I had a little time to spare, I spent my lunch hours as well as Saturdays at the Boston Museum of Fine Art. From Boston, my student days, I went to Ottawa because it's a capital where I could photograph people who visit the capital from Europe, from the United States, and the capital of Canada, and it proved to be right.
YOUSUF KARSH had decided that his success would lie with being able to photograph people who made a difference. And it's interesting that when Solange Gauthier, whom he married, asked him, "YOUSUF, do you want to be rich or do you want to be famous?" He said, "Famous, of course."
A lot of his lighting was learned in the theater in Ottawa. And Madame KARSH was very involved with that, and she introduced KARSH to many people at the theater. But I think he learned a lot about spots in the theater, of how they directed them to focus on one person and so forth.
We were in his new studio on Bank Street. Solange, that is, and Yusuf and myself. No furniture. We were sitting on orange crates. Very poor, very young. He was all flushed with the idea of really having his own studio. And he went to a window, and Yusuf said, "Wait a minute, Betty." And he tore the curtains down. And he came and draped them around my head and said, "Sit in that corner." And I did. And that was the turban.
I think he had to have that steely will to start a photo studio by himself as a new business in 1933, the depth of the Depression, in a country that didn't necessarily easily accept new immigrants, and certainly not visible new immigrants, which is still what he was. He was always incredibly courteous, and I think that it was for him a part of his character, yes, but also a part of his toolkit, a part of his mechanism for gaining access and getting what he wanted. He was able to find phrases that would make it impossible for you to say no to him.
When Franklin D. Roosevelt visited Canada, I took a really journalistic photograph, a candid photograph of the four of them, and suddenly the Prime Minister introduced himself. He said, "I've seen some of your work, and let me know what I can do for you." So he remained in office for some 23 years, and he did a lot for me.
When I warned them that Britain would fight on alone, whatever they did, their generals told their Prime Minister.
Will you tell me how you happened to photograph Winston Churchill?
Yes, you recall Mr. Churchill paid a visit to North America 2 weeks after Pearl Harbor. And I approached the Canadian government, who have shown tremendous kindness from the very beginning of my career. And their answer was, yes, they will put a few minutes aside.
Is it, I've heard that you grabbed the cigar out of his mouth to take this picture. Is that true?
Churchill came in and says, "What is this?" And he posed with his cigar in his mouth.
And Yusuf was already set up.
Seconds, you know, he didn't hardly had any time at all.
I felt the cigar should be removed. So I said, "Forgive me, sir."
And plucked the cigar from his mouth.
I clicked. And this is the picture, this photograph.
It may have been an impromptu moment in a portrait session, but the reason why that image was picked out of whatever else was shot that day was because it did already accord with a certain kind of mythic image of both Churchill and Britain. It suited the kind of propaganda need, and it basically made Karsh's career.
I must have seen the Churchill photograph in Life magazine when it appeared in 1942. I was old enough. That was the era of radio. Magnificence and the expansion of radio. So when I saw an image of a famous man whose voice I knew, the two coalesced together and made a powerful amalgam.
Later, he said, "Well, now take one smiling," and he said, "You can certainly make a roaring lion stand still." And that picture became an icon of World War II resistance to the Germans, to the fascists, and became famous all over, and Karsh became famous too.
Life was the progenitor of mass pictorial communications on a very successful level. In fact, it dominated the market, certainly on this continent. And Karsh wanted entree into that media empire.
Karsh is working in an era when the illustrated magazine is a dominant form of mass media. So this is the era just before television sort of takes over that role. So illustrated magazines like Life and Parry Match are circulating all around the globe. Probably every middle-class home had one version or other of them, and so people were very familiar with the kind of images that Karsh made. And so from a relatively small place like Ottawa, his images could circulate across the whole world.
Karsh wanted a young student to experience his trip to Europe, photographing creative celebrities. So they interviewed me, Madame Karsh, and we got along. She was quite a woman, very mercurial, fashionable, spoke her mind, direct, and she cared for Karsh a lot. I think they liked me because I was so naive. I was a country boy, and it was like winning the lottery. It was just an incredible experience to work with a person like that, to work in photography, and to travel in Europe. His job on this trip we were on was to photograph mostly the creative people in Europe, the intelligent, intelligentsia might call it, the artists. Everybody smoked back then. Picasso, he took all my cigarettes. I should have opened out and said, let's sign it and do a little picture. I didn't. His pictures of Casal, I think it's one of the best pictures he's taken. It shows the strength of him as a musician. He was playing Bach at the time. And the lighting on the shoulders, you could see the strength and you could feel the music to me, but I was there. We developed his 8x10s in closets when we were in Europe. He developed them. I really wouldn't want to develop them. If I made a mistake, it'd be the end of me. So he developed, and he had a little green safe light and would inspect them. And if they need a little more development, put them in there. And usually they were perfect. When he met these people, he knew stuff about them. He had to impress those people that he was just not a photographer, but he was a person on their stature, an artist, and a very good one, and that he was going to create a sense or an aura of history around those people, and he wanted those people to know that. And that's one reason he carried what I call the big black book, which was all his portraits. And people could leaf through it and see, ooh, this famous person has, oh, look at those, they're beautiful. And that would soften everything up. Madame Karsh, she had a great grace about her, and she saw something in him that sort of fulfilled her life. And they never had children, and I just can't imagine them having children because photography and his creativity was their child, so to speak.
I had a Christmas card, a wonderful Christmas card from her, which I always had, but a charming one of her sitting by the fire, looking all by herself. YOUSUF would not obviously took the picture and wrapped up in kind of shawl, saying, as soon as I get my feet back under me, I'll call you. And then the next thing I knew, she was dead. I was terribly shocked.
Control of light, whether it's artificial light or natural light. And the other is his adaptability. He admired Mauriac, wanted to make a wonderful portrait. So he went up to Mauriac's apartment, took all of the equipment up, and the lights, and the stands, and the power went out in the building. So, you know, but it really didn't faze him. He just simply did something else. He put Mauriac in front of a window. He had an assistant take a sheet off a bed, use as a reflector, and decided to make like a pencil drawing.
He had this innate sense of composition, and he had this ability to do a couple things at once. Understand the person, and he would read up on them beforehand, talk with them, run the camera, run an 8x10 camera, get it in focus, and talk to people, either in French or English, do two things. It was just amazing to see that. He'd shoot at 1/10 of a second and focus, and the pictures were sharp.
Dans les années 50, c'était le match et le journal de la famille. Quand j'étais gamin, ma mère travaillait à Paris Match, et donc chaque semaine, elle ramenait Match chez nous. Donc depuis 5 ans, bon, je ne vais pas vous dire que j'ai appris à lire dans Match, mais en tout cas, j'ai appris à regarder les photos.
KARSH. 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 Vous voyez ça? KARSH. KARSH.
Années 50, années 60, c'est la continuité du grand match, mais horrible à la télévision.
Television and the internet and all of these other forms of communication have taken the impact out of that great still photograph that you might see on the cover of something like Life magazine or in Match magazine, because Life magazine was our window to the world at that time.
From its inception, photography's had a close relationship with celebrity. In a sense, you could say the emergence of photography coincides with the emergence of the public celebrity as an important part of everyday life. So from the first portrait studios on, photographers were anxious to photograph famous people, celebrities of one sort or another. But equally, celebrities recognized that photography was a way to promote themselves, because then their image could be widely circulated through society and potentially reach a whole new range of customers. KARSH was successful because he gave his sitters what they wanted. He was the perfect public relations official portraitist. And if you're in public office, or if you're, for example, a Hollywood celebrity, that's what you want. You actually don't want an insight into the complex realities of your personality. You want a smooth, heroic, idealized public image, and that's what KARSH gave people. It's not such a bad thing. I'm just saying that's what he gave you. If you commission a wedding photographer, you don't want the eventual portrait to be some kind of innovative, avant-garde, insight into the complex tensions of the families that are being joined by this marriage. No, you want a beautiful, ideal, heroic-looking image of a couple in love.
I saw YOUSUF, and no bells rang, except that I noticed the eyes, and the eyes intrigued me. We said hello, we spoke a little bit, and a year and a half later, I married him. This was a candid, last-minute photograph taken on my 40th birthday. Only now am I beginning to realize, from the distance of 38 years now from this woman, how quite extraordinary this photograph is. They used to ask me, what is it like? Isn't it glamorous, you know, to be the wife of Mrs. Karsh and to travel all around, etc. And I would used to say, it's hard work glamour.
You see him constantly trying to meet new people, photograph celebrities, yes, but also always accepting any jobs that came his way. He never lost that work ethic that was something he accepted and became ingrained in him very early on. Work hard, never give up, start again.
He did industrial work, commercial work for Maclean's Magazine, a series he did over a period of almost 2 years. And that is very photojournalistic. His eye is just seeing everything. And this one is so interesting, I think, because it's so many photographs within a photograph. You could crop this, you could take this little bit, and it's a photograph. You could take this little bit, and it's a photograph. You could take that, and it's a photograph. You could take this, and it's a photograph. I mean, all this chaos going on, how do you take a photograph with all of that going on and know when to capture just the right moment? But no matter what he was doing, he still had the same incredible eye for composition and the same control of light. He could have been successful at any of them, but his favorite was portraiture, and that's what he's most famous for.
His style is about understanding a relationship, and the relationship he means is not necessarily the one with his sitter. It's the one with you as the viewer of his picture. He's trying to find that relationship between you and the sitter and himself.
The core of portrait studies is subjectivity of the photographer, of the sitter, and of the viewer. And so I began to think of a way of considering portraiture as a kind of performance. Suppose we were to say that the individual before the camera has a certain job to do, to audition for a part in your own life, as it were. Just as you're interviewing me now, I am performing. But for whom am I performing? An unseen audience. Similarly, the subject of a portrait photograph is in an analogous situation. In YOUSUF Karsh's work, as in many others, the performance has been, as it were, pre-established. The result is a reaffirmation of who that person is supposed to be.
If you're photographing JFK, the relationship I have to such a subject is already mediated by mass media. I don't know his character except through the images that I have seen of him. The attitude he brings through his photographs to celebrities, and particularly to political figures, is just not an attitude that we perhaps hold as dearly today as we did in the 40s and 50s and early 60s. I suspect many people today are far more skeptical about their public figures. I mean, we know too much about them, that we know their scandals, we know that even their sex lives have become public knowledge, so it's hard to look at them in the way that Karsh's photographs seem to look at his subjects.
I think what photography is very good in recording surfaces. When I did exhibitions with the small portraits, so people came and said, "Oh, Thomas, that's Petra, that's Heinz, that's Jürgen." And I always had to tell them, no, that's not Petra, that's not Heinz, that's not. They mixed reality with the media. Since I'm doing the big portraits, nobody's asking or is telling me this anymore, because it became obvious that that's not Heinz, that's not Petra, that's a big photograph of them.
Seeing something and imitating the thing has always been hugely attractive. It's why people create works of art. But you must always remember René Magritte and his picture of a pipe, under which is written, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe." This is not a pipe. And that's because what it is a picture of a pipe. And you have to understand the nature of a two-dimensional image, that it is an interpretation.
Because photography so faithfully captures appearance, it's very difficult, I think, for a photographic portrait to somehow penetrate beyond appearance and tell you something more. In a way, Karsh's career indicates the difficulty of the task. For him to try and penetrate beyond mere appearance, he creates a very artificial and theatrical kind of portrait sitting in which people are often portrayed. They're almost like what we used to call, what we historians call in the 19th century, occupationals. The blacksmith holding his hammer, or the hunter holding his gun. With Karsh, it's often the statesman holding a book, or looking statesman-like into the distance, imagining a better future or something like that. They're indicative of the understanding on the part of the photographer that merely photographing somebody is not going to be enough, that you don't penetrate beyond the surface of appearance just by photographing somebody. You have to have them doing something that is revealing in some way.
He was just there to record people. He wasn't trying to think about, he wasn't trying to take a photograph and saying, this will change people's minds about this person. He was just trying to capture something truthful in the person, and then people can take it any way they wish. When we were doing the photographs, his concentration was totally on the person, trying to capture the person. He was just focused on finding some truth in the person sitting before him and putting it on film and sharing it with people. YOUSUF, he wasn't someone who did click, 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 and then went through and said, maybe that one works. He would not do that. He would wait until he saw a moment, and then he would capture that moment.
Do you feel old-fashioned, YOUSUF, doing what you do behind that?
Not at all, no.
Camera and cape?
No, not at all.
What we wanted to do was photograph Karsh photographing someone. And he said that is out of the question, that he did not want us, that would be intrusive to the subject. And then he said, if you want to shoot me photographing someone, I'll photograph you. So I was Karshed.
How do you go about it? Do you try to relax them? Do you try to find some inner truth within the person that will somehow make their face appear at that moment?
I'm trying to keep them silent so I can proceed with my work, and the purpose of that is to photograph you.
I see.
And when I work, I don't talk.
You telling me to shut up?
No, on the contrary. Silence is not shutting up. No, silence is discrimination between excessive talking and excessive bombardment of question until the poor fellow does his job. Then I will sit down and answer any further question you may wish.
Proceed, Maestro.
Dreadful, dreadful. That's beautiful. At my eyes. Stay the way you are. God help you if you move. This is fabulous. Finished.
What's interesting about his photographs, his portraits, to me, is, and I'm not speaking about my own portrait, I'm speaking about the great long list of people. He captures, he not only captures the nature, the character of the person, but even with some really quite nasty people, he captures that little essence of decency about them, even from the meanest people in the world. And he's photographed plenty of
Invenção do contemporâneo.
É onde se fala, onde se discute, onde se debate, onde se propõe.
A reflexão sobre as questões do mundo moderno nas diversas áreas do conhecimento.
Todos têm que estar na mesma mesa para chegar a um acordo.
Segunda, 00:30.
Invenção do contemporâneo. Apoio CPFL, muito mais que energia.
Vento Aragano, a arte de fazer churrasco. Avenida Rebouças, 1001, São Paulo.
A Casas Bahia continua rasgando os preços dos móveis.
Rasgamos todos os preços.
São os melhores preços do ano.
Atenção, cozinha Lorena completa por apenas R$ 499 à vista. E leve grátis uma tábua de passar. Tem também guarda-roupa 6 portas Imperial ou Ravena, que custava R$ 1.299, saindo por R$ 999 à vista cada. Só R$ 999. E continua. Cozinha Linha, 7 peças de R$ 1.399 por R$ 999 à vista. Venha que o melhor preço do ano é aqui.
Móveis mais baratos ainda e juros zero é amanhã na Casas Bahia.
A pé, de bicicleta ou de barco, centenas de mulheres da Amazônia ganham seu sustento vendendo cosméticos.
Meu marido não queria que eu vendesse.
Seja usando produtos industrializados ou fórmulas caseiras,
O preparar é atrativo do amor.
o desejo de ser atraente está presente até nos lugares mais remotos do Brasil. Vaidade.
Porque a pessoa fica perfumada e fica mais atraente.
Amanhã, 11:30, no Cultura Documentários.
Un jour, je crois que c'est en 80, et on cherchait une idée. Qu'est-ce qu'on pouvait faire pour nous démarquer de tous nos confrères par rapport à l'élection présidentielle? Et c'est Michel Sola qui dit, et si on faisait venir KARSH? Une bonne idée, mais ça va coûter cher. C'est prestigieux quand même. On en a profité pour aussi faire quelques personnalités qu'on appelle maintenant people. C'est une reconnaissance d'être photographié par KARSH. Même pour les gens qui débutaient, qui ont été photographiés, Depardieu a été photographié par KARSH, alors que Depardieu, il n'en était qu'à ses débuts. Il rentrait dans le panthéon de tous ces gens aux côtés des Hemingway, des Malraux, de tous les grands personnages des 50 dernières années. Moi, je me souviens de ce personnage avec son petit costume et sa cravate. C'était propre, nickel, net.
Meticulous in everything he did. And he was beautifully dressed. He had a beautiful suit on, a very, very gracious man. He came with, his camera. He came maybe with one assistant. And what he wanted to do was to capture the essence of a person for posterity. So it was more of an emotional archive. Mr. KARSH, when he saw me, asked me if I could just sit on my mother's lap. And so he set up the shot, and when he went to click, the camera blocked. I just spoke to her this morning, and my mother remembers exactly that moment. And when we talk about it, we still laugh. The more we waited for the shot to happen, the more he grew anxious because trying to unblock this camera, and he could not do it. And he kept on saying, everything's gonna be fine. We're gonna, you know, don't worry, it'll be fixed in an instant. Finally, he did unblock the camera, and we took the picture that you know and the picture that I have hung on my wall. I was photographed with my mother many times, but the KARSH picture is the only one I have up in my home. There's a ceremony that maybe through technology is being lost. The ceremony of taking the picture, the ceremony of developing afterwards the frame, the ceremony to turning that negative into a positive and see it emerge. The more time you save, the less you invest in something, the less you invest in it emotionally. Do you really care about something you did in 5 minutes? Don't you care more about something you did in 5 hours?
Well, prints are beautiful. I mean, to see the darkroom going away, it is sad, especially as a learning process, because you have a long time to sit in the dark and sort of really meditate, you know. KARSH, he learned lighting. The man he apprenticed, it was all natural light. So he went from that to, and it was interesting to read that he actually printed for him. So I think you learn the most when you print. You know, like you learn how to work with lights. You see what they're gonna do when you go to print.
He had the best of paper. It was all the paper, then the enlarging paper was silver rich. They used a lot of silver in it. The blacks would just pop out. You could make a very thin negative, and the thing was, at the time, was make a negative that you can read a newspaper through. And then you made a print, as long as you had it exposed, you get a beautiful print.
His developers they were his own formulas. All the chemistry was mixed out of big, huge vats of chemicals. There was no ripping open a pack and dump it into a tray with some water. And then in the printing of it, there'd be burning and dodging, and I mean, the control was so remarkable. And at the end process, the photographs would be gold toned. This was an old Kodak formula from the 1930s. And often photographs for archival purposes are selenium toned, but this was gold toner, which is really unusual. And it would make the photographs very archival. And also it would change the depth a little bit, the tone a little bit. And it was very touchy to get it just at the right point. You didn't want it to be colored, but it added a little extra depth.
I'm impressed by portraiture as a form of high art, even if the aim is very modest and the circumstances are commercial. By high art, I mean in this context, the electricity of nervous reaction between subject and object, between the seen and the seer, working perhaps in an unconscious way to arrive at a kind of memorable chemistry.
He's able to help the people that are sitting for him to relax and to be themselves rather than sort of posing for a photograph. And I think that is a great gift. And I think probably that way of dealing with people that are sitting for you comes from a great deal of experience. Because as with anything, I think, of working with people, half of it is psychology.
Well, it's wonderful to be photographed by a great, then you can relax. And anything that he asks you to do, or any lighting that he creates, or anything that he might ask you to do with your hair or to change your costume, you do it because you know that it's for the good, that whatever happens, he's going to make you look wonderful.
The result of the photograph has very much to do with what the photographer was thinking about.
There he is. Was it his 80th birthday? It was long. It was 1988. So I had a session with him. His wife called and asked if I would take his picture, and I don't think I thought it through well enough, you know, for him. KARSH was really, again, from that school where you sat and, you know, you conversed with people, and that is what was going to create your picture. Basically lacked that ability to sort of converse. So I think that he, although he could have talked, but he didn't talk that much. He pretty much took over the shoot, you know, and which any, you know, good photographer would, if they feel as if, you know, they want to help you out, they would, you know. And he basically went through a series of poses, and I remember thinking afterwards that he was giving me all of his poses. I can't say I did a great shoot. It's nice to see these Polaroid negatives. We still have them.
I think that film is rapidly becoming a lost art. People that still work with film for photographs, it's very hard to find paper. The companies have gotten smaller and smaller. They've stopped making a wide variety of papers. Films, there aren't so many films being made any longer. It's becoming more difficult to do, and it's a difficult process.
In the 80s, when Kodachrome 2 went away, there was photographers who ran out and bought boxes and boxes of Kodachrome 2, hoping that, you know, they could hold on to it, you know. But the reality is, you know, it went away. And one does mourn the loss of, you know, even black and white on some level. But on the other hand, it's replaced with a whole other idea. You know, I feel empathy for Karsh because I feel like I, too, would like to sort of continue capturing my, you know, my time as long as I can. I was thrown into history right away, and there's a sense of responsibility that I believe Karsh had too. That after when you've sort of done the work you have done, you realize you know it'd be a shame not to keep doing it, so that you had this body of work that was interesting from that time.
Are we historians as photographers? I don't know. Are documentary people historians? Maybe we are. Maybe that's our job in the long end, that our pictures will live long after us and will shed a little light to maybe some people.
I'm sure you all know that YOUSUF studied here in Boston, that he mixed the bathtub gin during Depression and learned from his mentors, great partners and great confreres. I'm so happy to show you the person that I was married to for 40 years. A funny, wonderful man, not very artsy, believe it or not, and very kind, and one who accepted people, not tolerated, but accepted, so that his portrait sessions turned into a collaboration, a willing collaboration, a collaboration of trust. Thank you, enjoy the show.
It's very possible, just due to technological obsolescence, that we won't be able to access many digital images. So few of them are printed relative to the number that are shot. So many of them are uploaded onto websites that may or may not survive another 5 or 10 years. It's going to be interesting to see what historians like myself will have to look at in 20 or 30 years' time, 50 years' time, 100 years' time, looking back to this moment.
I think that we're going through a kind of learning curve here with, we have our telephones that take pictures, and we can all take pictures. I think there's just a deluge of information.
I have no idea why people take so many photographs. Really, I don't know why.
The digitalization, it changed a lot the working with the camera, because suddenly you had this not dark room, but the light room, the screen, or TV or computer screen, where you then continued working on the image. I had one student who had a digital camera and was photographing like hell, so he photographing everything. And when he then had a meeting with me and he was showing his photographs, he couldn't tell anymore which one was good. He lost the feeling for what he wanted when he started. So yeah, he was lost in the mass of images.
What is going to preserve Karsh is if those images continue to be vital for the present. For example, a poster that has become extremely common, especially around in New York and I presume elsewhere in the country. As soon as I saw that image, it recalled for me a similar kind of portrait that Karsh had made of Martin Luther King in the early 1960s. But it's interesting to see the way, in this particular case, the kind of portraiture, sort of utopian, idealistic portraiture that he specialized in is being recalled for Obama. Impossible to imagine that for Bush.
I think we're at an age that everything is changing, and what I've done in my very small way, or what Karsh has done, will probably be seen in a different form. Closer to film, closer to inner reaction. I don't know. I'm too old.
Antônia Bujanra entrevista a produtora de eventos Monique Gardenberg em Provocações. Inédito, terça, 11 da noite. Fique agora com Invenção do Contemporâneo.